All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar Modi 3.0 Is the Neighborhood Still First? I am Shivangi Paudya, your host for today's webinar, and this webinar is a part of the Geopolitics webinar series organized by Policy Entrepreneurs Inc., an initiative dedicated to exploring critical global and regional developments and how it affects us. PEI has also been undertaking some important research work in this area, also publishing two research papers. The first publication, namely Pen Power in Politics, explores India and China's exercise of soft power through education diplomacy in South Asia. The second publication is called Of Infrastructure Diplomacy and Development, which explores Nepal's engagement with its major bilateral partners for infrastructure development. If you would like to check them out, please head on to our website, pei.center. Now, to briefly explain what we can expect in the next 90 minutes, we'll be discussing various facets of India's relationship with its immediate neighbors in South Asia, particularly Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Nepal, and how things may continue to evolve under Narendra Modi's third term in office as the Prime Minister of India. We have a wonderful regional representation on our panel of speakers joining us today, each providing us a unique perspective on this important topic. Let me briefly introduce our distinguished panelists. Ms. Suhasini Heather, our panelist from India, she is the diplomatic editor of The Hindu, where she writes on foreign policy issues and hosts a weekly show, Worldview with Suhasini Heather. Prior to this, she worked as a foreign affairs editor and primetime anchor for a leading private news channel. Throughout her career spanning nearly 3 decades, she has reported extensively on issues from across South Asia and beyond. She has closely observed India's foreign affairs for over a decade and also doing in depth coverage of domestic politics, which has also led to her receiving several awards and accolades for her impactful journalism. Our second panelist, I'm sorry, sorry. Our second panelist, Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed, is the executive director of Center for Alternatives and a former professor of international relations at the University of Dhaka in Bangladesh. He has held teaching positions at universities globally, including Sages University, University of Paris, Carleton University, and Taylor's University, Kuala Lumpur. Dr. Ahmed's research focuses on South Asian politics, religion, culture, tolerance, terrorism, development, refugees, migration, and the environment. He is a prolific scholar, having authored, co authored, and edited 57 books, 120 monographs, and published over 125 research papers. His recent publications cover topics like the COVID-19 pandemic, water rights in Bangladesh, responses to terrorism, and innovation in education. Asanga Abhayagunasekara from Sri Lanka is our third panelist. He is the Senior Fellow and Executive Director of the South Asia Foresight Network at the Millennium Project in Washington, D.C., where he also serves as a technical advisor to the International Monetary Fund. In the past, Asanga has led government think tanks in Sri Lanka, serving as the founding director general of the National Security Think Tank and the executive director of the Lakshman Kardigamar Institute for International Relations and Security Studies. He is a senior security advisor to the leader of the opposition in the Parliament of Sri Lanka. He has also authored several books, including his most recent work, Teardrop Diplomacy. Our fourth panelist is Anurag Acharya from Nepal, who serves as a director at Policy Entrepreneurs Inc. Anurag, over a decade long experience, has worked in Nepal's governance and politics through research and programming with different national and international organizations. At PEI, he leads thematic research on areas of governance, politics, and international relations. Anurag is a former journalist and a well known political commentator who writes extensively on Nepal and South Asia for national and international publications. I would like to welcome and thank you all for being a part of this very important discussion today. I would also like everybody to note that our speaker from India, Suhasini Heather, will be joining us shortly, but we will commence with the program for now. So before we get into Modi government and its neighborhood diplomacy, let's begin today's discussion by exploring the historical context of India's relationship with its neighbors in South Asia. Let me begin with you, Anurag. Now, India's relationship with Nepal has historical and deep cultural roots. We always talk about this. This has been shaped by their shared experiences and support for each other's democratic movements. The open borders, despite its challenges, is always talked about as one of the most unique bilateral arrangements in the world. However, the relationship is not without its share of challenges. Can you provide an overview of how the two countries have managed this relationship over the past decades, and how it has influenced people to people ties, including the population living in the borderlands?
Thank you for the question, Shubhangi. I think Nepal's relationship with India must be seen at two different levels. First, at the state-to-state levels, which also has a colonial legacy to it, and of the British India, which treated India as a kind of a protectorate state. The independent India, and by that I mean the bureaucracy in India, inherited this mindset, colonial mindset, that often behaves in a way that makes Nepal government and people in general very suspicious of New Delhi's excessive interest in our domestic affairs, which is often covered in our media. Thankfully, this is not a defining realm of Nepal's relationship with India. The second and more important realm of India's relationship with India is at people-to-people level. And this is more important. And this could be between people living in the borderlands on either side, or among civil society on both sides, or even among political parties on both sides. So this is an important factor, I feel, which has ensured that tensions and misgivings on both sides are sort of not allowed to blow up, and are often amicably addressed over times through a lot of back channels. Now, I've quoted this somewhere in my writings, that there was a time when Nepali Prime Minister Girja Prasad Koirala, Krishna Prasad Rai could pick up phone and call their Indian counterparts, Rajiv Gandhi, I.K. Gujral, and Chandrasekhar, to express their concerns, and vice versa. This was because they have been part of each other's political movement, extended solidarity, across borders, even participated in each other's movement, and democratic struggles. So that generation is now no more, and the incumbent political class on both sides, I feel, have not kind of cultivated those ties at those levels, which means they often struggle to reach out, or trust each other, or even empathize with each other's concerns when the state-to-state relationships come under pressure. Now, this certainly makes their behavior and policies towards each other less transparent, and which sort of sustains the tensions that build. Now, we saw this happen in 2015, and it could have happened again if the two countries are not able to address the underlying tensions and cultivate genuine trust for each other. And stop that.
Thank you, Anurag. I mean, let me bring Asanga into the conversation now. Like, as in Nepal's case, the historical relationship between India and Sri Lanka also extends beyond just diplomatic ties, with deep rooted cultural and people to people ties, particularly between the Tamil population, which also constitutes a sizable portion of the Sri Lankan demography. This relationship has also been punctuated by periods of insurgency and tragic assassination of India's then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. How do you think the two neighbors have managed this relationship historically?
Well, in Modi 3.0, the relationship, I would say, has dramatically sort of moved from its position on the devolution of power, which has been discussed by our president a few months ago, just before the inauguration. His commitment, as well as the Tamil Party's commitment, to sort of basically come with solution for the devolution of power. This is to the provincial council, which Sri Lanka has, and give full powers. As well as, this has been a long discussion in the Indian agenda. When Dr. Jaishankar, when he visited Sri Lanka after his assuming office, so his first visit, a bilateral visit, was to Sri Lanka this time. And you could see the importance of Sri Lanka from this visit, because the next election, the presidential election, is going to be in Sri Lanka, as well as there's going to be many changes that you could see in September and October. So the presidential election will be in September. The Tamil question, the reconciliation process, which is long overdue, which has been discussed by many governments after the in the post-war context, has never been fulfilled. So there are many issues on the Human Rights Council, UNHRC, where India is concerned on the Tamil minority concerns in Sri Lanka has not been addressed genuinely. So that is a concern for India. And you could see even during the Indian election, when the Prime Minister Modi basically discussed about Kachatiu issue. So Kachatiu was always comes to the during the election time, basically to win the vote of the southern Tamil parties, as well as for their political aspirations. So to cater to that, and this is it's been a sort of the historical thing, but then now what you see in 3.0, I see a tremendous significant shift from the Chinese influence, which was very strong before the crisis, the economic crisis. Now you see a significant Indian influence when it comes to infrastructure, energy, trade, as well as in the maritime domain, where you could see again Dr. Jaishankar's visit. He inaugurated the Maritime Coordination and Rescue Center, MRCS, which is a coordination center for the Indian Ocean vessels, for rescue vessels. So you see all of these dimensions playing in Sri Lanka. And very interestingly, what I see is that the ones who were against the in 2.0, Modi 2.0, like the Rajapaksas, for example, protesting against Indian projects, has joined basically the present president Wickremesinghe, and now supporting India. So in 2017, they were against a Chinese-built airport, which was going to be leased out to basically to India, where Rajapaksas were protesting. And now you see Rajapaksas supporting India with Wickremesinghe. So it's a new kind of political dimension that you see, as well as a shift in India's policy towards Sri Lanka. But I see a tremendous success in Modi's foreign policy in Sri Lanka. I'll stop there.
I mean, thank you, Asanga. And we'll definitely be getting more into these influences, counter influences, and shifts later on in the webinar. But for now, I'd like to go to Dr. Ahmed. How would you characterize the general state of India-Bangladesh relations in the decade since Bangladesh gained its independence in 1970? I mean, there is a longer historical context that goes before 1970. But can you provide an overview of how the dynamics between these two neighbors have evolved in the years following Bangladesh's independence?
Thank you very much. I think when it comes to bilateral relationship, I guess we are in a best position in South Asia. Asanga talks about a little bit of a tension or previous tension between Sri Lanka and India, and so did Dr. Acharya on the issue of Nepal and India. But on the issue of Bangladesh and India, I think it has evolved dramatically, particularly after Sheikh Hasina coming to power for the second time in 2009. I think since 2009, we have something what I call regime stability. Bangladesh still suffers from lack of political instability, and we never had political stability actually. Bulk of the South Asian countries, they don't have political stability. What we had for the first time and what we still have for the first time is regime stability. So since end of 2008 or 2009 onwards, the same regime has stayed, and that has made a difference. Because of regime stability, the government could do a lot of things together with India and together with other countries as well, based on the foreign policy principle of friendship to all, malice towards none, that Bangabandhu declared way back during the height of Cold War. And the principle was not done after 71; it was pre-71, when we were part of Pakistan, and that principle stayed, and it worked in the case of Bangladesh positively, mainly because the principle is based on the issue of economic development and not on security issues. On the security issues, Bangladesh has always been hesitant to make special relationship with whichever country. And there are several countries who wants to make special relationship, particularly United States is very keen to make special security arrangements with Bangladesh. But somehow Bangladesh has succeeded so far in not doing that, and I don't think any regime can do that. That also is the case. But what Bangladesh has done is on the issue of development. They got this friendship to all in a way where we have interesting investment from all the countries, including the United States. Maybe they focus on energy more than other roads and highways, where no doubt India and China, maybe more China than India, but still both have invested in roads and highways, in railways, and I think this is going to go up. But still, we still have some issues that are where the two sides have not succeeded in resolving them. One would be the water issue, of course, and that also is related to Tista River more than other rivers. That's one area. The border killing would be the other one. There are extrajudicial killing in the border area. That is also a concern for a lot of Bangladeshis. And of course, there are other issues like maybe some criminals of India hiding in Bangladesh and Bangladesh criminals hiding in India. Those are certain small things, but still sometimes it can be big. Now, on the issue of water, there has been some change, and also it went beyond India, and I think Nepal probably would be interested in this development. What happened is the Tista River, as you know, it flows all the way from Himalayas via Sikkim, and then West Bengal, and then Bangladesh. Now, on that particular river, there was a deal, or a draft was made between Bangladesh and India 12 years back, mainly related to sharing the water, which West Bengal did not agree. And I have always argued that there is good reasons for West Bengal not to agree, even as a Bangladeshi. But as an academic, I was saying, no West Bengal chief minister will do that. And the reason is quite simple, because Sikkim has already built 26 live hydropower projects. And each of these hydropower projects, though they say it's run-of-the-river projects, but run-of-the-river project is a misnomer, an Indian extraordinary hydrologist, I would say, Kalyan Rudro, makes it very clear that there's nothing called run-of-the-river, because when you put a hydropower project, it will divert water, to some extent, and his calculation is 5%. And the reason is quite simple, because if you build a hydropower project, it's not only a hydropower project that you build, you actually build cities around. You have to have people to look after the hydropower project. So hospitals get built, schools get built, roads and all. So little cities develop near around the hydropower project. It's not like you keep the hydropower totally isolated. And for that reason, according to his calculation, 5% water gets diverted. So if you have 26 hydropower projects, small and give, and on the average, if it is 5%, or even if it's less, there's hardly any water during the winter season. And that's the contention of West Bengal. So unless you bring Sikkim to this whole sharing, there's no reason why West Bengal should agree to this. And this Delhi has been hesitant for different reasons, because they have invested on those hydropower projects. So they're not going to dismantle them. So the change that has happened recently, and where a little bit of geopolitics also come, is that Bangladesh then decided over the years, the engineers thought, how about conserving the water during the rainy season when we have more water? If we can, have a reservoir or something of that kind, and keep the rainy season water and use that water during the dry season. So that was what you call kind of a plan, to which, when it was given to the Chinese showed interest, quote unquote. They haven't promised, but they showed interest. And on the basis of the interest, they also did an assessment and said it's possible. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the Chinese infrastructure development and the efficiency they have, built over the years. So they said it's possible to do that, but it will cost. And the calculation is around a little bit less than $1 billion. And the Chinese said they're ready. Now, during the Indian election, India's, and they knew very well that right after Bangladesh's election, our Prime Minister would visit China. That was planned already. A visit to Delhi and visit to Beijing was already announced. And so they knew that after the election, she will visit Beijing. So India's Foreign Secretary comes to Dhaka and makes, the statement. It did not come from India's Foreign Secretary, but came from our Foreign Minister, that India is interested in the management project, wants to join the management project. And so that was a change, because it clearly shows that the sharing of water is not going to happen. And that has created a little bit of a problem for Bangladesh also, because India also wants to do an assessment, although the Chinese have already done the assessment. So the question is, would India do it alone, or will it join with China, or can there be a consortium where Asian Development Bank, Japan, or World Bank, they also enter this mega project? So that's, I think, is something that is now been discussed. But what has happened is our Prime Minister went to the inaugural, this Narendra Modi's third time coming to power. She was there. And I think within 2 weeks, she went back for a bilateral visit. And in that bilateral visit, the statement clearly pointed out that India wants to join this management and want to resolve this bilaterally. But within 24 hours, Mamata Banerjee, came out with a letter actually to the public. It's available on the internet. A letter to the Prime Minister of India, saying that no sharing will be allowed, no linking of the rivers would be allowed, because there was other idea that other Indian rivers would be linked to Tista to bring the water. And she made it very clear that Tista has to go to the original form, which means you dismantle the 26 hydropower projects, which is not possible. So one thing is now clear, that there will be no sharing of water. And this is a new development in those who are interested in the water discourse. So other than that, I think we have excellent relationship, the two countries. But as I said, this is one. And the final thing I want to say, our Prime Minister now is in Beijing. 20 odd MOUs have been signed with different companies and all. There is a focus on high tech, more on high tech. Even electric vehicles will be built in Bangladesh. So more technology cooperation with China. I don't think TISTA will. Maybe they have discussed, but I think they will still wait for Delhi to come up with its own plan and see what can be done. So I guess our relationship will continue on the development platform, not so much on security or doing something which would alienate other countries. I think Bangladesh has been very careful in that, having a relationship with China in a way which would not alienate other countries. And if it is development, it's a win-win situation for all. So I guess Bangladesh will continue, even with this little bit problems here and there, having a good relationship with India. Thank you at this stage.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed. Thank you to all panelists, actually, for delving into this historical evolution of India's tie with its neighbors and also touching upon some important emerging trends that clearly affect the region. It is clear that these relationships have been based by a complex interplay of cultural, political, and economic factors, which now brings us to discuss how these dynamics have unfolded since Narendra Modi's first term as Prime Minister began in 2014. My question for Anurag is, in your earlier response, you talked about the various facets of India's relationship with Nepal, how despite many challenges, the two countries have generally enjoyed a cordial relationship in the past. But things have changed over the past decade. So the relationship has since gone through periods of diplomatic tensions, particularly over what Nepal considers India's micromanagement in its affairs. How would you reflect upon India's role in Nepal since Narendra Modi came to power in 2014? Anurag, there you have to unmute your mic.
I think it's got more to do with, less to do with Narendra Modi coming to power and more to do with the fact that India's own neighborhood has changed over the last decade. I mean, countries like Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, which were grappling with their own domestic conflicts, have now moved beyond that and started looking inwards and focusing more on their infrastructures and growth. Their needs have also motivated these South Asian countries to seek aid and investments, including from China. I mean, the new power on the rise. But unresolved border disputes between Beijing, whose presence in South Asia has now become more assertive, is understandably also making India more jittery. And it sees Nepal's relationship it sees its relationship with Nepal from that prism as well. And we know that my other colleagues might come back to this from their own perspective, but we know that India has already made its concerns pretty much clear to the Nepali side, especially about India's strategic interest in Nepal's infrastructure and power sector. And also about Beijing's own ability to influence political outcomes in Nepal, something that we've not seen before, like coalition building. Now, as an IR person, I would say that this is a bit of a normal reaction from a residential power that wants to protect its own sphere of influence. But I think a lot of common Nepalis believe that India is coercing Nepal to reject Chinese aid, which I think is a bit overstated. But Chinese aid, even the Nepali side are now becoming a bit wary about the government is becoming a bit wary about overcommitting to the Chinese aid, given that they offer a bit exorbitant rates on the interest, and they kind of agree to fund projects which are not properly, sanctioned through domestic, consultation or domestic consensus, or something like vanity projects. We've come across different African countries or Asian countries which have fell into similar kind of, quote unquote, debt trap. And then we look at, our own latest Pokhara International Airport, which was funded through Chinese aid. And there is kind of worry among, Nepali government, officials, as well as those who are watching these, infrastructures being built, as to how we are going to fund these infrastructures. How are we going to repay, such a huge Chinese debt? I think, so while I agree that Indian government under Narendra Modi, or even before that, has always been very clear and steadfast on its core security concerns, but they have not always succeeded in convincing political parties in Nepal to, even prolong or make amends, to, how they deal with other powers. So their jitteriness is quite understandable. Also, I mean, if you see over the last few years, they have not been able to, dictate the political outcomes as much as they had in the past. So which clearly points to the fact that Nepal is also becoming more assertive in its own relationship in the neighborhood. So I think it's a case of, evolving relationship rather than looking at it from Narendra Modi coming to power and how it is shaping the bilateral relationship. Bilateral relationship have moved in a more of a trajectory, and it's another fact that Narendra Modi has come to power in India.
Right. Thank you, Anurag. I will come now to you, Asanga. In 2022, India provided a financial assistance of $3.8 billion to bail Sri Lankan economy out of a severe economic crisis. However, this is also a period when Sri Lanka's diplomatic relationships was at what a lot of people consider a low point, with significant differences between Narendra Modi government in New Delhi and the Rajapaksa president in Colombo. How would you describe the years of turbulent relationships with Modi and the Rajapaksa brothers? And what were the contributing factors, according to you?
Well, clearly, there's a pendulum shift from, you see, Chinese-dominated sort of infrastructure, the heavy influence coming to political parties during the Rajapaksa time, the political funding, as well as the infrastructure built, which was, I think, discussed in many panels, as well as in the global discussion forums about Sri Lanka's, white elephant projects, such as the airports that was built without any flights, which Anurag also mentioned, the debt trap, discussion. So that's going on. So this was actually captured during the last 3 years, during the Rajapaksa time, the last 3 years of Rajapaksas, in my book, The Teardrop Diplomacy, all about the Chinese infrastructure projects and whether those infrastructure projects, how much did they contribute to the economy, and how was it impactful, the impact of these projects towards India as well as the United States. The how sort of the India views Chinese sort of growing influence in the island. So what you see is a kind of a reset in that relationship from the Chinese towards the Indian side. You have more of the Adani projects right now, the Adani port development with the US for $535 million with the US government funding. So you also have the wind power projects of Adani, the Trincomalee development. Again, Dr. Jayashankar, when he was in the island last month, so giving houses to basically in different areas of the country. And so you see tremendous significant Indian influence from the infrastructure, energy mainly, from the wind power, as well as direct energy purchase. They're discussing about it. And Trincomalee, one of the strategic ports that we have, which has been, uh, one of the concerns for the ultra-nationalists of Sri Lankans from the 1990s, that this port would be taken by India, is now already basically India has started the development of the port as well as the surrounding infrastructure. Again, what's going on right now is that all these factors would come up in the political arena, which is going to be the elections in the few months' time. But the geopolitical context has to be also understood when it comes to Sri Lanka, because the island nation in the Indian Ocean, as well as the geostrategic location of Sri Lanka's importance. When it comes to the Chinese vessels, like the research vessels that was blocked by the Sri Lankan government for 1 year, saying that the moratorium was taken by the government, saying that will not allow any Chinese research vessels to come in. The research vessels had a sort of a hybrid. India has a concern saying they had a hybrid use of military purpose also, as well as the hydrographic surveys for submarine warfare. So it was a concern raised by India, which was taken very seriously by the present government. So you can see while Rajapaksa invited the Chinese submarines, as well as many sort of Chinese influence in different ways, I would say, to the island. You see Vikramasinghe kind of taking these moratoriums against China, but then again questioning the US strategies also, like the Indo-Pacific is an artificial construct, questioning the AUKUS, kind of using the strategic autonomy to a degree. So this, I see it for the first time that Sri Lanka is kind of exercising its own strategic autonomy, saying that, look, we need to work with Russia, we need to work with Iran. So Iranian president was in Sri Lanka, the Russians basically on the Ukraine war, the Sri Lanka's position, you can see. It's kind of a similar line that India also has taken when the first visit of Narendra Modi in 3.0 is to Russia. Now, this is not conventional. I mean, usually the prime minister would go to a neighboring country. Why would they go to Russia? So I think there's a geopolitical context, which is, that pride sort of posture that he wants to bring in Modi 3.0 is very clear from this visit. He wants to bring in some sort of a pride to the foreign policy of, and this is clearly articulated from the literature, which is of Dr. Jaishankar, Why Bharat Matters. So I think it's a kind of a new shift that I see, and the surrounding countries would also need to sort of take this into serious consideration, because whatever the Indians immediate periphery would have to take up this what's going on in the India's domestic arena, especially during the election time, the Hindutva movement. I've clearly written about it, and more you propagate the Hindutva as well as minority concerns, so it impacts the regional surrounding countries, because it opens a door to China clearly to come into those countries, because they see, especially the Islamic or the Muslim countries, would see it as Maldives is a very good example. Where you see the campaign India Out campaign, which was one of the main campaigns which managed to sort of win the popular vote. So in Sri Lanka, again, India's significant influence that's going on, the infrastructure, the Adani, all this is going on. But then you'd have to wait and see in the next few months how it sort of would develop, and how the leading party, the most popular party, is a Marxist party. For the first time again in the Sri Lankan political history, you have the Marxist party, which was called the JVP earlier, who was against India on the 13th Amendment, the devolution of power, has now struck a sort of a balance with India, saying that they are kind of shifted their strategy also. So it's kind of the new trend that you would see again with that prideful posture of Indian foreign policy, and Sri Lanka would have to navigate between India, China, as well as the United States.
These are some very fascinating insights and on developing trends, especially. Thank you, Asanga. Dr. Imtiaz, I'm coming back to you again. Like you said, if there is one South Asian neighbor with whom Modi government in India has enjoyed an excellent relationship, it is with the Sheikh Hasina government in Bangladesh. The past decade has seen the two countries resolve their boundary disputes and increasingly better diplomatic, security, and economic cooperation, inking major infrastructure, trade, and connectivity deals. Um, Hasina has been in power for a long period. What has changed since Narendra Modi came into power in 2015, and how has that led to improved ties?
No, I think it's a pre Modi thing. I think there's a consensus in Delhi on Bangladesh, and the consensus is that yes, Bangladesh needs India, but India also needs Bangladesh, and this has to do with the Northeast India. I think what Hasina government did was remarkable because they had serious issues, security issues in Northeast India, which the previous government actually made it more complicated. The lot of insurgent groups, including ULFA members, were roaming around in Dhaka city. And, they also used to operate bank accounts. There were also allegations of weapons being supplied through different channels. There was issue of 10 truck loads of weapons, which was somehow they managed to keep that out of ULFA. But anyway, so the overall the point that India also needs Bangladesh, that became very clear. Because without Bangladesh, I don't think India can, feel comfortable when it comes to Northeast security. Because Northeast has its own problems with Delhi, and we have seen recently how Manipur really, the terrible violence in Manipur. There are different insurgency groups in Northeast India. So given that point, I think there's a consensus in Delhi, which started during Congress time when Manmohan Singh was in power. And so what I think Modi did was to follow that up, follow that consensus. And that consensus still remains. So I think in Delhi, it's not only BJP who would be pro-Bangladesh, same would be Congress, and same would be Trinamool Congress. Even the letter that Mamata Banerjee sent to Narendra Modi on the issue of Tista, I think she did a great help to Bangladesh, making very clear, not to wait year after year on the issue of sharing, because sharing is something that the West Bengal will not agree. And the point here is, they need West Bengal's approval because water is a state issue. So I think, in Delhi and Dhaka, there is this consensus, and this consensus would remain so long, the relationship with other countries is based on development. And there's a win-win situation, as I said, on the issue of development. A good example would be the infrastructure, the Padda Bridge, which was quite news because earlier World Bank was supposed to fund that particular bridge, but World Bank somehow raised the issue of corruption and all, and did not, fund that. But that did not stop our Prime Minister. She said, "We'll build that with our own money." And here China comes with the technical support and delivered the Padda Bridge practically on time. So now, when the bridge got built, it's not only China which would benefit. I think benefit will be more to India and also to the United States, because if transport on ready-made garments, goes up and down, even the West would benefit from this infrastructure development. So when you have infrastructure development, there is a situation of win-win. Now here I want to emphasize the point, and I think South Asia would be a good example, not to see geopolitics from the point of view of conflict. You see, I think that is a mistake that we always do. And the reason is quite simple, because geopolitics, when it emerged in the Western discourse particularly, had to do with conflict. If you remember Lebensraum, space, and so whether it is Mahan or Mackinder and Jelen, you name all the big geopolitical theorists, they all emphasized on geopolitics of conflict. And the reason was quite simple, because that's the era where you had colonialism, and massive colonialism, colonizing as much as possible, because that was the idea. And you had Syria geopolitical conflict, and that got internationalized. Now, I think two things has happened, which is changing this scenario globally. One, of course, is decolonization. You can't go back to colonialism. So there's a decolonization, and that has brought aspirations of people of different places to a point that it can't be reversed. So you can't reverse the decolonization aspirations of India, for example, with more than 1 billion people. Same would be the issue of the African countries. Similarly, would be the case with Bangladesh. So decolonization. Now, from decolonization comes an extraordinary development in capitalism, and that is globalization. Now, keep in mind that globalization is not something, a lot of people would say, oh, it was there also in 19th century. No, in 19th century, you had internationalization of trade. Then, of course, international finance came. At one time, internationalization of investment came. But globalization is a different economic structure, which even Marx or Lenin, they even did not, I think, foresee. And that was for the first time in history of capitalism, production became international. You see, in production, becoming international was never thought. In the 3 volumes of Capital and the 4 volumes of Surplus Value that Marx wrote, Adam Smith, name anyone. Later on, Lenin's book, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, nowhere they thought that production would become international. Now, today, production is international. What it means that you are tied up in a way which was not there in the 20th and 19th century. So our whatever development we have done, ready-made garments is one. As you know, Bangladesh is now number 2 ready-made garment producer after China, though the gap is huge, but still as number 2. Keep in mind that bulk of the cotton comes from different countries, including India, China, East Africa, and then it gets processed here, and then we have a surplus with Europe and United States where we sell. So, it's a combination. The machines used to earlier come from Germany, now they come from China, and other countries. So and it's not only with ready-made garments. It's with iPhone, with SUV. Bangladesh produces Pajero SUV, but it's assembling rather than producing. So that is what I think the structure which has changed remarkably. Now, this globalization or development of capitalism cannot be reversed. You can't go back to something that was in the past. Yes, Donald Trump would love to have it in his Make America Great Again. But to produce a T-shirt in New York and to produce that T-shirt in Sri Lanka or in Bangladesh would differ. Labor is, and this is what Deng Xiaoping understood very well, and that's how Deng Xiaoping made a difference to China and to globalization and to China. Now, coming to that, what we are now seeing is this globalization and decolonization contributing to something what we call multipolarity. Now, if you read S. Jayashankar's the other book, The India Way, which he actually wrote before he became the Minister of External Affairs, although it got published when he was in the chair, the India Way makes it very clear, and time and again he talks about multipolarity, that the world is becoming multipolar and there's no way to change that. And there's no way to change that, actually. Yes, the West is trying its best. Joe Biden is trying his best. NATO is trying his best. But there's no way to stop the aspirations of billions of people. How can you stop some of the polar? Look at, well, China definitely is one polar. India is a polar. Brazil is a polar. Turkey is a polar. And I can go on and on. They're all polar, small, big, And in this multipolar, this is the first time the world is witnessing multipolarity on a global scale. The world never saw multipolarity on a global scale. They had multipolarity in Europe, they had multipolarity in South Asia, in Africa, but never on a global scale, you had multipolarity. This is the first time. And that's the tension. And that's the reason some of the think tanks would say, no, this is a balancing act, or some will say, you have to choose between China or between India or between China or US. I don't see that. I see because of decolonization and globalization, what the world is moving, towards multipolar, and that allows geopolitics of conflict to get transformed into geopolitics of cooperation. And I can tell you a series of geopolitics of cooperation. Let's take India and China. They work together in BRICS. They worked extraordinarily during the Ukraine war. And, Sang also pointed out why, of all the countries in the world, Modi heads off to Moscow at a time when you have a NATO summit. The interesting part of that. So India is giving a clear signal to the title that Jayashankar had in his book, The India Way. And you cannot stop. That does not mean that India is going to tilt to Russia. That's the other mistake we do. Just by going to Moscow would not mean that India is going to forget everything that it has with the United States. No. I think this is the sophistication that is coming up. You can talk it as a strategic autonomy, but I will say it's a geopolitics of cooperation. It's bound to happen. Similarly, they work together in, I said BRICS on the Russia-Ukraine war, not to mention also they're together on the Shanghai cooperation. Near home, they have both India and China, if I can bring in China here, India and China, they vote together on the issue of Myanmar. They have been together on the Myanmar, whatever is happening in Myanmar. Look at all the voting patterns in the United Nations. China and India are together. Now, as we speak, India's largest trading regime is China. It has surpassed the United States already. So this year, it's China. And the other factor which people sometimes don't flag, the number of students, number of Indian students going to China is more than number of students going to UK, because UK was the original. And now British economy has gone down, things have become expensive, and not to mention that when it comes to science and technology, China efficiency has increased. So bulk of the Indian students since 2016 they have been going to China. Now this is going to have an impact 10 years after, because they would be knowing each other so well. So if you look at all those developments, I think what we are moving into an interesting time, and I'm not trying to say in a way of the Chinese skirts that we are moving to an interesting time. I'm saying in a simple English terms that we are moving to a exciting times, let me put it that way, is that this transformation into geopolitics of cooperation. Now, how do we do that? I think here the mindset is still not matured enough to work on the geopolitics of cooperation, largely because we have all been trained and educated in geopolitics of conflict. So if we can see that every crisis has an opportunity. And how do we do that? I can easily see all the countries are trying to negotiate in a way where to have relationship with all the countries. And I've said in several times, I think the mistake of Zelensky was that he did not see Bangladesh's foreign policy principle before. If he knew about Bangladesh's foreign policy principle, friendship to all, malice toward none, I think Zelensky could have saved the country, which is now in a terrible ruin. And one can see the future. Even the future is bad because of the heavy debt they have already gone into because of the billions of dollars of weapons being supplied there. So it's an interesting time or exciting times, and I think here Jai Shankar, I see him more as a as a theoretician who got an opportunity to practice India's foreign policy, and I'm sure Modi has all the blessing on that, and one can see the emphasis on civilization, and he makes it very clear in his book, The India Way, that this emphasis on civilization he learned from China. He makes it very clear. It's there in the book. He said that the Chinese emphasize on civilization, and rightly so, because China is an old civilization. India is also an old civilization, and he makes it very clear that I learned this from China, and there are good reasons for us to have all what you call relationship with all, and including whether we can have multipolarity in Asia as much as a multipolarity on a global scale. So this transformation is where I think our South Asian countries also need to work, and I think India knows very well not to push to a point where that country will shift to the other polar. That is the point. And then this is Nepal or Sri Lanka, Maldives. I think India has learned in a little bit in a bitter way not to push things to a manner where that country will go to other polar, because there are options are more. So in this multipolar world or multipolarity, the emerging multipolarity, the options are more, and the West has to realize that. There are people who realizes that. A good number of scholars have come up and realized that, but unfortunately, as of now, looking into the Palestine issue and the genocide in Gaza, one can see that the establishment is yet to understand, and this is largely because of the military-industrial complex that particularly the United States has. So it's an interesting times, it's an exciting times, and I think the scholars have to work more than ever. I'll stop.
Thank you, Professor. Truly very fascinating, particularly what sounds like a very positive and practical antithesis to the geopolitics of conflict in a multipolar world. So that's very interesting. I would like to now move on to the final and the probably most awaited segment of our webinar. Let's explore the potential strategic shifts or departures in India's foreign policy under Narendra Modi's third term. I know we've all slightly touched upon this. So, Anurag, after several years of diplomatic tensions, Nepal's relationship with India finally seems to be a bit more stable in the last couple of years. With Narendra Modi coming back to power, how do you see this relationship unfolding on the economic front and on the political front? Nepal's Prime Minister was in attendance at New Delhi a few weeks back when Narendra Modi was being sworn in. So do you feel the two countries have turned the page for the better? How do you see it unfolding?
I think that's a correct assessment, Shubhangi. And I feel whether it's a old Indian Congress government or whether it's a new BJP government, I think every government that has come to power in India has always wished to have a very good relationship with Nepal. And the major reason for that is because our borderlands are so intertwined. Obviously there's an open border, and also there's a lot of security implications that comes with those kind of ties and those kind of arrangements. So I think having a very cordial relationship with the government in Kathmandu offers an extra layer of security to the Indian side as well. Especially because India has for long complained about a lot of counterfeit currency being being smuggled into India through open borders, and also there are concerns about espionage as well as extremism, fostering extremism inside India, which has external links. So I feel India does take a relationship with Nepal very, very seriously. And I feel, despite some tensions with Nepali side, especially we've seen that escalate during and around the time of Nepal's constitution drafting in 2015, which resulted in the blockade. So I think since that period, there has been a lot of rethinking on Indian side as well, and this is where we have to give credit to Narendra Modi's government and probably Jaishankar, who has been in the thick of it, for pushing through that rethinking on the Indian side. So I believe that rethinking has genuinely translated into improved ties. It has not translated. It has not improved to the level that we wish it should, but nevertheless, it has significantly improved. So and also given India's impressive economic rise, I think the incentive that India offers to Nepal in terms of its developmental aspirations, whether it is to absorb the surplus energy that Nepal might produce over the next few decades, or whether it's to fund its infrastructures. I think the incentive and also the market that India offers, I think these are genuine incentives that India has offered in terms of economic partnership. Those are the highlights of Narendra Modi's government, and which I don't think there will be much departure on that during the third tenure as well. And on the political front, I think there are slight deviations, because I feel one factor that comes into play is Narendra Modi's party BJP, some elements within BJP and its parent party RSS, the more hard Hindutva outfit, and how it looks at South Asia in general and Nepal in particular. So it's no secret that some elements within BJP as well as within RSS dream about this pan Hindutva rise within South Asia, and to that extent they have sort of established ties across Nepal with the Hindutva elements that are active over here as well, and that have become more active since BJP has come to power. So I think, but you cannot, take that and, define it as India's official policy, because we've not seen, or heard any of, those in, power in New Delhi, or those, in the Ministry of External Affairs, making those kind of, statements or overtures. So, and we also have to remember that, the party is so big that the top leadership cannot take responsibility about every single leader making such statements. Now you look at number of communist leaders within our own country making some very undiplomatic statements when it comes to relationship with India. And it does not define Nepal's official foreign policy or even the policy of their own political party. So we have to see the relationship in that light, and I think the same would be true for overzealous BJP or RSS leaders. So I think to sum it up, I think relationship under the current Modi government under its new tenure, I think it's expected along the similar trajectory that it has in the last couple of years, especially with improving ties and deepening economic relationship. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Anurag. Now back to Asanga. Despite this webinar being about Modi 3.0, we have noticed that we haven't been able to escape China in the conversation. So I'd like to explore that dimension a bit deeper. China has been a major investor in Sri Lankan infrastructure and development projects over the past decade. You've also mentioned that this includes the very controversial Hambantota port deal. Considering China's significant economic interest in Sri Lanka, how do you expect the island nation to balance its relationship with India going forward? And what role do you anticipate India to play in this, what you have also described as a complex geopolitical dynamics during Modi's third term?
Given thing to our foreign policy. We have no other option than balancing it. As you know, Sri Lanka had a non-aligned foreign policy, just like most of the South Asian countries from the beginning. But we sort of moved, the Rajapaksas moved towards a closer China-tilted foreign policy with multiple agreement signed, strategic relationship signed during President Xi's visit in Mahinda Rajapaksa's tenure. Then we had a military dimension coming in, where the submarines coming in, which was a serious concern for India. So I think there is the China dimension in Sri Lanka is all about balancing whoever the leader who's going to be the next leader in October. But what you see is right now a president with a coalition basically headed by Rajapaksa. So it's a kind of a mixed government that in place. But again, I mean, people should know that the present president has not been elected by the people. So he was appointed when the previous president, was removed from office. So this is the first time again the Sri Lankan political history we have some model like this. And where China, you see China again coming into the sort of play in Sri Lankan economic context when it comes to debt restructuring. The recent announcement where China has supported Sri Lanka. China was a late comer in the debt restructuring, but India was one of the first creditors to support Sri Lanka. India's initial support gave a lot of confidence from as well as trust among general public that India came to the rescue with about 4 billion assistance as well as on the debt restructuring. China took a long time for the debt restructuring as well as some support to come in. But what you see is a kind of a shift in that Chinese, like I earlier mentioned, the significant influence, but moving towards more towards India. But India, here there's a kind of a very cautionary, I would say, area that because some of the projects that India is involved, such as the wind power project, I can give you an example. So you try to do a lot of things, in a very fast-paced manner because the space is there now for India, but you might get into certain trouble just like China. Basically, where public consultation has been less, where has been in the process of the environmental impact assessment. So all that has to be considered because Sri Lanka is a very good case study for many other South Asian countries to understand where we went wrong in projects, Chinese projects. And it is a very clear area that basically initially each project where we have borrowed massive amounts of loans. For example, Hambantota Port you mentioned, one of the components I have looked at, basically there are several loan components that Hambantota we managed to borrow. We borrowed at 6.8% one component, which is very high. Now, some of the scholars, some they compare with the Japanese loans, saying that Chinese loans are equal to Japanese, which is incorrect. Japanese loans have less interest rates as well as conditionality is different. They're transparent, so you can't just because they are Chinese loans about 10% and Japanese about 10%. So they try to compare. You should not compare. And the main concern for Sri Lanka comes on two dimensions. One is on the economic front, on the geoeconomic basically dimension, where both India and China plays a significant role in infrastructure development. Then you have the geopolitical, which I was talking about, mainly on the ocean domain, maritime domain, where there is a significant contest going on between India and China in the Indian Ocean. So this will basically, I can only see the trend from the Washington think tank that I'm engaged here on South Asia. We see more ships built by China than United States because of the facilities that China has for building naval capacity. And you can see the latest reports. That capacity has increased tremendously on the China. So you'll see Indian Ocean and littorals such as Sri Lanka would have to face this contest and would have to do the balancing, like Professor Imtiaz mentioned. But you should not underestimate also the capacity of these small countries as well as the medium-sized countries, because they have many other options. One good example is Thailand. Thailand is now ready to join the BRICS, a treaty ally of United States. So you have Thailand and Malaysia joining the BRICS. So you see, there are many sort of options for these countries, but certain options that you pick can upset the whole, the regional stability, which should be a very alarming thing, and we should forecast that these sort of things shouldn't happen, and because the regional stability should be the priority for all the regional countries of South Asia. So I think Sri Lanka should. We learned a lesson from the economic dimension. We became a bankrupt country. Our foreign reserves dropped to near zero. Then we had the governance diagnostic basically of the IMF clearly highlights there was a governance issue, not only an economic issue, but there was a governance problem. So again, the report is one of the first reports that came out on the governance side, how weak on the corruption issues, mainly the large scale corruptions in the country. So people are not so happy right now in the general public because corruption has still not been addressed. Large amounts of money looted from projects, because there's no way of Vikramasinghe investigating the Rajapaksas. So that's why the new model that is in place, they are trying to delay the elections, which is again going to be a serious issue, which will bring instability to the country, because people will be not happy at all if they try to sort of maneuver with the democratic processes. So India should be an example on the democratic processes when it comes. So there were many incidents on the democratic backsliding during the Indian election time. That shouldn't have happened, but India should be an example of strong democracy. So I would like to see Modi 3.0, where the domestic politics come into sort of a moderate posture, accommodating more minority communities, as well as moving towards a more stable India, working towards a more stable neighborhood. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Asanga. I would also like to explore China with Dr. Ahmed. Beijing has also been bolstering its strategic and economic investments in Bangladesh over the past decade, particularly in infrastructure, energy, and technology sectors. How do you assess Bangladesh's navigation of its political and economic relationships with the two regional powers, being India and China? And what can be expected of Dhaka's relationship with New Delhi during Modi's third term as Prime Minister?
I think it will all depend on Bangladesh more than China. And I was talking about Padda Bridge, for example. Padda Bridge is not something that China wanted to do. It was Bangladesh having problem with World Bank, and then since World Bank did not give that loan, which probably was more friendlier, with less interest, but Bangladesh did not wait and went to China. So I think it will depend on Bangladesh how it wants to develop. If it is on the issue of development, of transforming the country to a developed country, I think we should not have serious problems as we discuss. Yes, there will be countries who try to bring more security issues, talk about their own concerns, and having their own outfits in different places, and maybe tying up that if you want a larger investment, so these are things you have to do. But as I said, Bangladesh has always been very careful of not having any special security arrangements with any countries. Now here, particularly with the West. Now here, the interesting part is, I think partly I would say this is the result of having a very good relationship with India, because even India would not want Bangladesh to have a special security relationship with the United States, for example. Forget China. There's no way. Even with the United States, India will not want Bangladesh to have a special security relationship. And it has to do with the history in South Asia. India has suffered because of Pakistan's special security relationship with the United States. And so, in some way, I say Bangladesh is blessed to have a relationship with India in a way which would not allow the United States to meddle in Bangladesh. And this became very clear during our election. As you know, there's some deficit, there's some concerns with our election, particularly because the opposition did not participate. And there was a lot of pressure from the United States to make changes and all. But at the end, India came openly and pointed out that no, this is Bangladesh's domestic issue, and it is Bangladesh's concern. And the United States had to, back away from whatever they were trying to do. So, so this is important, is how Bangladesh can play its role. Now, there are some certain problems and certain structural problems, and I think it has to do with all the South Asian countries. Maybe some more, some less, and this has to do with the elite, the policymakers, or what I call the elite of the society. Bulk of the elite actually, they have their one leg to the West, because bulk of the children they live in the West, and that has become a serious problem. One is there has been a serious brain drain. We have a big diaspora now in the West, and some are very creative. Very creative Bangladeshis who become impatient because of the lack of infrastructure, lack of access on a lot of things, and I can understand that, and they leave. And so bulk of the elite children, like my University of Dhaka, is this is interesting university because it has not only given birth to Bangladesh in many ways, but also created Bangladesh elite. But none of the elite children now, as I talk, they study in Dhaka University. That's the problem. It's a serious problem, because bulk of the elite, they are in New York or in Montreal or in London. Now, if you have a structure of that, and this has also to do with India. India has the same problem. The India's elite, if you remember, during the COVID-19, special planes were used, to fly them off. They were so scared when the COVID hit Delhi, if you remember some of the scenes. Now that's a problem, and how South Asia, in the age of multipolar, in this age of geopolitical cooperation, will work on that, because bulk of money laundering also takes place. Bangladesh money laundering is huge. Corruption is huge. You see, we never ask this question. Yes, corruption is huge, but we never ask where the corruption money is going. And I think Asanga pointed out, about corruption in Sri Lanka. The point is, bulk of the money, of corruption money, does not stay in Sri Lanka or in Bangladesh. If it stayed in Bangladesh, probably some casino would have developed, some hotels would have developed. Bulk of the money goes to the West. That's the problem, goes to the developed countries. So that's how you're going to, and this is a South Asian problem. I call it a South Asian syndrome. How they're going to work on it, I have no idea, But one thing that I flagged is that we need to bring the diaspora in. The diaspora needs to be institutionalized in a way to help the countries, including Bangladesh. So I'm talking about Bangladeshi diaspora, for example, must, yes, I understand they have left, but they should not be isolated. They should, work. But unfortunately, we don't have that. We have critiques. A lot of diaspora, there are critiques who would be very critical of the government, but not. There are a little bit of, in IT sector, certain things are changing because the scope. And here, I think we need to invest in a way where the diaspora can also get connected. And because as I said, in this geopolitical transformation, the opportunities are huge if you can make good use of it. So it lies with Bangladesh. Now, since we're talking about Modi 3.0, three things I think needs to be kept in mind, because that also impacts upon rest of South Asia. One, I think the third time Modi, they need to address the gap that has come during the Modi era. There's a serious gap. The rich has become super rich, but not all have come up. And then you have people who are rich showing the richness. You see, this is very un-South Asian, and this has to be not only un-South Asian, very I would say very non-Asian, to show richness. In Asian civilization, you don't show richness. But Sri Lanka, Asanga would know very well. The rich try to show the richness. Now, when you do that, you humiliate the people. That's the problem. And the Indians have really made what you call, some of the some of the constituencies, religion did not work, because the good one in the Ram Janambhumi's constituency, where BJP thought would sweep, but they lost even in religious constituency, if I can use that word. So because the rich, the super rich in India, were showing their richness, and that is not something that humans like, because it's humiliating. And so they need to address that, because that is one issue. The second issue, and I'll come back to the first issue again in different way though. The second issue is, and I think this has already been flagged a little bit, if I'm not wrong, that Modi third term needs to be less ideological, because if you hype, ideology, I can understand why they do that. I can understand the rationale of Hindutva and all, because it has a vote bank, but you need to be very careful and not to hype it in a way. And this is the third one, which is interesting, which I think is very important and an interesting area, is the electoral reforms. You see what has happened if you look at the election results in the three national elections that Modi won. The first time when he got to the prime minister, he only had 33% of the popular votes, but through his alliance and all, had 2/3 majority, the interesting part, okay, or absolute majority. The second time, he raised it up to 36% of electoral votes and got again 2/3 majority. The rest of 67% or 70% are not with him, but the 70% are divided. Now, this is the problem with the Westphalian electoral system, to some extent. I think Sri Lanka tried to address that at one point of time. But I think it needs to be addressed in a very serious way, whether the Westphalian system can work in other countries or not. It's not even working in the United States. If you can see how terrible the situation has become with Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Whoever has seen the last the debate between the two would really be horrified to say, "Wow, well, are we sure we are in the right direction? This is the superpower we are talking about." So this time, this is interesting. This time, the popular vote that BJP got was 36.59%. The change was only 0.8%. Now, 0.8% changed so many seats. Just imagine, only 0.8. If Congress would have worked or made an alliance with the two, with Nitish and Babu, they would have changed the whole structure. Now, that is a problem because the majority is not there. It's not like the French election or the Iranian election where you have two-tier election. Sometimes in the first one everybody can get in, and the second time only the 2 or 3 can go for election. And you have seen the French results. On the first balloting, everybody thought that Pen will win and the conservatives will win or the right wing will win. And the second one, it turned upside down, the whole structure. Now, I think we need a serious reform, because if India can do it, I think it will have a serious impact on the rest of South Asia. If they can come up with a formula where actually you have a majority rule. And this is the reason why Mahatma Gandhi was against this Westphalian system. He said it is a heartless doctrine. I am quoting Mahatma Gandhi. He said it is a heartless doctrine because what it means is that, and this is interesting, what it means is that 51% can impose its will on 49%, and I'm against it. Now, he said 51%. Now, you don't need 51%, you need 36.59% to get the government. Same thing happened in the United States. Hillary Clinton got more popular votes, but the presidency went to Donald Trump. So my point here is, this is the area we need to work. Now, Nepal, I'm sure, Dr. Acharya would know more than this. On the average, Nepal had a constitution, every 10 years they have new constitution. So I remember one particular book, I was asked to write the foreword, and this was on Nepal. And I told them that, why don't you go for unwritten constitution? Better to go for unwritten constitution, because written constitution doesn't work. The Mughals ruled South Asia without any constitution. They had no problem, 330 years. UK doesn't have a written constitution. New Zealand doesn't have a written constitution. Israel doesn't have a written constitution. You go bill by bill. Now, that's one formula. I'm not trying to say that it can be done easily, but I'm trying to say that you need to brainstorm these electoral reforms, because, frankly, democracy is not working. Now, that's one part of it. But if you look at the members who are elected, and I'm talking about Indian research and Indian parliament, in the last parliament, they had around 40% member of parliament with criminal records. And out of 40%, 25% had serious declared criminal records. That's one thing. But bulk of them are millionaires. In the United States, 40% or 44% are millionaires. Now, if are millionaires, you should call it plutocracy, not democracy. You see, the point is, it doesn't make any sense, because to get a nomination, you have to be a millionaire. And that has happened in whole of South Asia. So we should not be blinded by this system. I think we should have our own system. All the countries that I'm talking to, whether it's Nepal or Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, they're all old civilization. We can go back to 6th century BC without, way back. We don't have to just worry. We can just go to Mahabharata or even earlier and talk about the civilization that we have. So from a civilizational point of view, I think it is important for us to have an indigenous understanding of what this democracy is all about. I don't take democracy as an imposition from the West. I'm sorry, that's not my understanding. I think we had a far more, if you can just the issue of justice, Nyay and Niti. If you read Amartya Sen's book on justice, will tell you it's an old thing. And the justice has always been the content. Otherwise, how can we have Gautam Buddha or Ashoka? Some of the extraordinary, thinkers. And of course, even Mahatma Gandhi, and a lot of other, you have the Bauls, for example. We have an extraordinary, peace building civilizational context. And I think this needs to be evolved, or this needs to be mainstream to the point that we do a kind of electoral reforms where we actually have people's representation and majority rule, and can say, I don't want to use the word majority rule, that can have other dimension, because then the minority becomes, really in a problematic phase. And that's what has happened in Sri Lanka, that has happened in India now with the Hindutva case, same thing with Bangladesh, the minority, having a tough time. So this majority minority must go, because it's in the mindset that we have built this majority and minority, because everybody is a minority. Look at the 4 people that we have on the screen. We don't look same. Our hairstyle is different. In fact, Asanga and Dr. Acharya can go for a majority because they're wearing glasses. And if I bring my glasses, yes, we can, sideline Shuvangi and say, look, we are the majority, we are wearing glasses. So we can bring a glass nationalism, So the point here is each of us are minority. And this is something that has to come to education, has to come in our way we communicate, and then we build a society much healthier and much productive. So I think if India can contribute to some of these things, and there are extraordinary scholars who are also thinking in the same way that I'm speaking, I believe we can reach an interesting time or exciting times from now, 50 years from now. Thank you.
A very, very thought-provoking analysis, Professor Emma. Thank you so much. And it leads perfectly into like the last round of this webinar, because for this segment, I'd like to quickly hear your thoughts about the recently concluded Indian elections. And I'm particularly curious about the general public perception in your respective countries about Narendra Modi and why or how he was voted back into power. It doesn't have to be just your perspective, simply reflecting on the public opinion back home, because this is something that happens quite often in Nepal. So I was just curious to see what it's like across the board. Anurag, you can begin, please.
Thanks, Suvangi, and thank you, Professor Ahmed, for that very delightful detour around South Asian democracy and electoral system. Maybe we should consider having another webinar exclusively on that issue. No? But coming back to your question, Shubhangi, I think in Nepal we can't help but discuss Indian politics, just like we can't help but dance to Indian Bollywood numbers. There's so much of Indian media presence in South Asia that we are very well versed on what's happening on the Indian side, and rightly so, because it does affect us on day-to-day basis, and as a largest country in the region, what India does in its domestic sphere also sort of spills over into our territories as well. So when Narendra Modi was elected to power, and the way Narendra Modi and BJP projected itself, I think it did take a very it took kind of a center stage in South Asian discourse, and still continues to do so. But I think the watershed moment for Nepalis, increasingly discussing Indian politics came for 2 reasons. One is because Nepal, after years of being preoccupied with its own domestic, conflict and constitution drafting, finally, shifted, and moved to discussing more, regional geopolitics and how it impacts, our own growth and development. And India also being rising economic power, so obviously there was also a lot of interest from foreign policy observers on Nepali side about what India is doing. So that's there. Of course, there are several there were several writings, and there continues to be a lot of writings about Narendra Modi and BJP government in India on Nepali side in Nepali media, and bulk of those writings are about the kind of policy that India has taken vis-a-vis Nepal, whether it's related to trade, whether it's related to vis-a-vis China, which also affects, which also is a Nepali neighbor. And also about how the civilizational ties that we were talking about earlier. But some of those writings also talk about or issue express concern about Narendra Modi's previous tenure as Gujarat chief minister, and the kind of implication that it would have for Nepal in terms of how the Hindutva elements in India have tried to establish ties with those on this side. So it's quite rightly the concerns are expressed in Nepali media to that effect. But I think a lot of that is more noise, and does not necessarily impact the way the two countries discuss or engage with each other. But we do need to take note of the public discourse that is going on. And I think the last development that happened over the controversial map dispute between Nepal and India, because there is impending there is a continued dispute over borders on the western front between Nepal, India, and China, the tri-junction, the Kalapani tri-junction. So I think that was another point where which sparked a lot of public discourse in Nepal, and led to kind of tensions between the two countries. So that has had implications on public discourse, I feel. Other than that, I think there is also a lot of anticipation and excitement, especially among Nepali power traders or power producers in Nepal, about deepening power trade between the two countries, not just with India but also potentially with Bangladesh. So it's a kind of a mixed bag, but yes, of all the previous Indian government, this government is discussed more for various reasons that I've mentioned before. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Anurag. What about you, Asanga? What do you think?
Well, I think the Sri Lankan polity also clearly understood that, from the beginning of the elections, that the Modi would, clearly secure his target, which is 400, reaching there. Even most of the US scholars in here, they believe that they would reach, his targets. But I think there was a miscalculation on the BJP political alignment, with the voters, especially to use Hinduism's, acceptance, tolerance, values to bring in the minority vote more focusing on the Hindutva propagating, and then the rest of Kejriwal and all that was as a concern in the US. Also, certain issues on the US soil, on the intelligence operations, and so kind of a India sort of not I would say coordinated in a proper manner, or like gone astray. So that was the view towards the latter part of the elections from the Washington. It was a concern on the democratic backsliding, where, and all that was discussed. But Sri Lanka, I think Kachatiu was the moment that the entire public and the media got more excited on that particular news, because Kachatiu is a long sort of a, it is already discussed and concluded. It's not it always comes up during the election time. In the previous election, Kachatiu was a remark that Modi makes, and it belongs to Sri Lanka, as well as it's been clearly was discussed with Indira Gandhi during that time, and so concluded. So I think the Modi playing to the Tamil audience was the main highlighting part in the Sri Lankan side, where the Sinhalese Buddhists, especially the majority of the country, sees India as always, coming into the, kind of sort of push the Hindutva or the Hindu movement or the territorial expansion. So that's sort of the mindset which the majority sees as a threat for the country. So this is the same issue that most of the ultra-nationalist Sinhalese Buddhists see the devolution of power as a threat to the country. And that's the reason that the Marxists also took, we had two insurrections. So the last insurrection in 1989 was on the devolution of power, that they were against that. But it's quite interesting to see that same faction is now tying up with India and now is the most popular political bloc right now. Because they're not been in power. It's a very simple slogan that they use, because they're not corrupt. Because people blame in Sri Lanka that the economic crisis, yes, that was bad mismanagement, but then deeper in that is corruption. So we need people who are sort of, I mean, the Marxists are the ones who are sort of the most popular right now. So, and the opposition party. So there could be an alignment between the two, because they're both talking against the Rajapaksa regime. Many people had to face the economic crisis. Even the lower middle class have sort of gone through a lot in Sri Lanka. So what I noticed from my last visit is like, the poverty rate has increased significantly in Sri Lanka, and so all that would sort of play a major role in the elections, upcoming elections. So how Sri Lankans perceive the Indian elections was mainly on the areas on the Kachativ, as well as seeing Modi as a very strong leader emerging. But there is, of course, disappointment when what was expected was not received by Modi, because he has not he has never had coalition governments. So it's the first time that Modi will be facing coalition, sort of a government, as well as how he's going to sort of maneuver his policies on his, especially on the labor, the nuclear. There's a lot of the areas that the West is looking at, where the Western, companies could go into India and sort of, work in that environment. So I think a lot of that would play in the, in the next couple of years. So we'd have to see. But yeah, so I mean, Sri Lanka is right now in the election mode. So next week we will declare the elections on 17th on the presidential race. So definitely it has an impact because the first party to visit Modi was the Marxist Party. So they were welcomed for the first. I mean, it's a sort of a, and what they projected in Sri Lanka was really interesting, saying that we have the confidence of India backing us. But this is the same party that took arms against when Rajiv Gandhi signed the Indo-Lanka Accord. And the opposition leader is again a son of a former president, Ranasinghe Premadasa. So that's again another interesting factor. Something like Rahul Gandhi, because he was assassinated in 1993, and then before Rajiv. Rajiv was assassinated before, and then Premadasa. So you have, so it's again a South Asia dynamics, but then definitely Indian elections definitely has an impact, and we'd have to see in the next few months how it will develop in Sri Lanka.
Thank you. Professor Ahmed, your thoughts on the topic? Professor, you'll have to unmute yourself. I'm sorry.
Well, I think the media, the corporate media, got exposed this time. I think the level of trust on the media has gone down. And I mean the corporate media has gone down to the extent that serious academicians or scholars, they don't, trust the news at all, whether it's CNN or BBC. I'm sorry to say, they're wonderful people, I'm sure, but I think they have lost. They have lost this time in big time. And it started even earlier, not with the Gaza, genocide, but even with the Russian-Ukraine war. Myself, I was absolutely depending on the people who were there in Ukraine on the front line, sending messages and all, analyzing things. I was looking into alternative media and all the discussions where, from the beginning, very clearly, point was there's no way Russia is going to lose. The stakes are very high for Russia. And you have seen how Russia has gained from this particular conflict. And Ukraine somehow got destroyed in the process. And, how they will rectify that, I don't, it's very difficult unless there are changes. We have to wait and see whether Donald Trump comes back, whether that will have an effect or not. With the Gaza, it got exposed even more. I remember, 7th October, the attack took place. 8th October onwards, when the Israeli genocide started, or collective punishment, we were getting messages and footages from Gaza itself, and this is the first time humans globally saw a genocide live. If the genocide took place in many places of the world, including Bangladesh back in 1971. And I was just a class 9 student, and I witnessed the genocide. But that, it was always, very few individuals knowing that, but it couldn't be flagged to the way it should have been, because the newspaper was only one of the way you can do that. But this time with the technology, and this is where the TikTok played an interesting role. And this is not going to stop. Even if you ban TikTok, there are other TikToks. You see, this is the fascinating part of technology. Once it gets out, once it's invented, let's put it that way, other humans can do that. It will never remain limited. You can keep it closed door for maybe few months or so. And even with the vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, you have seen, several countries started making it, and that's what science is all about, and that's what humans innovation or creative, the capacity that humans have. Once one human can do it, others can understand and can do it also. So media in India also, I think, played a role in putting Modi or BJP up. And there were corporate interests. They went up to the point of saying that he's going to win 400. BJP also believed it. But if you had contacts, and since we have contacts with people, we knew that they're not going to do that well. Yes, they're probably going to win, but they're not going to do that well. Even with West Bengal, there were good number of other sources saying that. Because that's our concern. If you have fundamentalism in West Bengal, then it helps the fundamentalist forces in Bangladesh. So we are really careful, and we get worried when that happens. But this time, I think it's a clear case that media, the corporate media, tried to do whatever it was doing for its own interest, whereas the situation was different. From out of that, what comes, I think, limits of ideology or limits of what I would call extremism. You can't take South Asia, and it's with all the South Asian countries. You cannot take it to the extreme You can take it for a few years maybe, but you can't build a state in a very singular manner. My definition of fundamentalism is, it's a understanding, looking into the world from a singular standpoint, and it can be religious fundamentalism. It can also be a secular fundamentalism. Both are singular interpretation of things. Now, when you have a singularity in South Asia, given its historical, given its civilizational context, it has always remained plural. Structurally, it's plural. We can talk about different races and different languages and all. They're all blended. Bengali language, for example, one can be proud of Bengali language, but we have so many Turkish words and different words in Arabs, name any influences, Persian. You can go to Iran and literally speak Bengali, they would understand. You go to Istanbul, they will understand Bengali, because there's so many words that we use that are Turkish and Persian and Arabic. And just to give you an example, not to mention now with even with English. So you can call it a Bengali language, but it's very plural. And I think with all the languages are that, I can understand Nepali language, and a Nepali can understand Bengali very well, because the words mingle. We can talk ourselves as a Bangladeshi, as a Nepali, you can make it territorial, but there is a South Asian element to our context, way we dress, way we, the music is the best example. The rag, the musical grammar, the rag that you have in Lahore is the same rag you have in Colombo, in Kathmandu, in Dhaka. The rag is same. It binds. Musically, we are all tied up. This is the interesting part that we have in South Asia. So given that context, it's not only South Asian, in each of the countries that we have, the modern state that we have built, following, British colonialism and all, has always been very, what you call, multi-layered, multifocal, and that is not going to go away. You can put it in. So that limits of religion or limits of ideology became quite clear. And as I said, only 0.8% shifting of votes. Just imagine, just 0.8. It's not a big one. If it had been a little bit more, things would have gone in different direction. And I think they know that. What I think would work for the opposition is the alliance. The bigger alliance you have, and that's what our political parties we have built through the Westphalian system. It's an assembly. We really don't have political parties, except for the Communist Party and the far right. We don't have party. Party is not, we have assemblies. So Congress or BJP, they're all assemblies. They have interesting groups and subgroups within each of these parties. So I think since the media got exposed, humans are extraordinarily very creative. They understand what to do. So in future, I think people would be more looking into other kind of information, other kind of sources, whether, and that's the reason why Facebook and other platforms have become more important, because you can get information. As I was, I was looking into my iPhone. The reason was our Prime Minister is in Beijing, and everything is been absolutely, boom, coming out. What has happened? Where is this? What are the agreements, etc. I don't have to read a newspaper in order to get that. The information has been built, and you can check and double check with other sources as we speak. So we as I say, this is an exciting time that we have, and I'm sure this will have an impact not only in bringing the South Asians together. Maybe at times there will be some issues, but I think it will bring South Asians together much more in different platforms. So I'm very hopeful about where we are heading to. It's only that we need to change our mindset and build on that through our education, through our media, through all the sources from where we get information. Otherwise, you get blinded, and you might end up with much more, hateful kind of a structure. Unfortunately, there will be some of those things, but as I said, there are limits to extremism in South Asia. I'll stop.
Thank you, Professor. Since we have been streaming this webinar on YouTube and on Facebook, we have some questions from the viewers. I'll just direct one question to our speakers each because we have almost spoken with each other for about 2 hours. I hope you don't mind. The first question is for Anurag. So,
Yeah.
when the new Indian Prime Minister took office in when Narendra Modi took office in 2024, one of the first actions was to secure the release of Indian citizens who had been illegally recruited and trapped in an ongoing war in Ukraine. However, reports indicate that many other South Asian citizens, including Nepalese, were also illegally recruited and trapped. As a major power in the region, do you believe India should have taken a more proactive stance to advocate the release of all illegally recruited South Asian individuals and not just those with Indian citizenship?
Yes, with the clout or the leverage that India has currently with Kremlin, I believe India could and should do more to secure the release of not just its own citizens, but also, all of citizens from South Asian countries. Uh, but it does not mean that our government, for instance, there are a lot of Nepalis that are trapped as well. It does not mean that Nepali government should stay silent and do nothing on its behalf. For instance, our own Prime Minister was in India for the swearing-in ceremony of Narendra Modi. Did he talk about this, or did he raise issue about securing release of Nepali nationals from Russia? Because India has excellent relationship with the Kremlin. I believe that he did not raise that issue significantly enough, because if he had, it would have found its way into public discourse through media, and or even in some kind of briefing that Prime Minister made to his cabinet back home. But we don't see that conversation anywhere. It just seems like those people are doomed and they have been abandoned by the state. So this is more concerning for me. But having said that, yes, I think now that India has already raised this concern with Kremlin, and Kremlin is ready to facilitate release of Indian citizens. I think Nepali side should strongly pursue this with the Indian side to secure release of its own citizens as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Anurag. The next question is directed towards Asanga. What are the main reasons for the recent positive turnaround of Sri Lanka and India relations? Was the financial support during the crisis the turning point?
Yes, clearly the financial support was the turning point. I mean, close to 4 billion when it comes to medicine, as well as food, essential commodities, and that was a huge relief for many people. We had long queues for food essentials, as well as gas and many other commodities. So India was one of the first to come for assistance, and where Dr. Jaishankar mentions in his new book, Why Bharat Matters, that this was again a role for India, that how important that India sees Sri Lanka. To stabilize Sri Lanka is a priority for India. So he mentions this in his book, and I think the main turning point was the financial assistance, but then followed by the sort of the different projects when it comes to energy, when it comes to Trincomalee development, transportation, and many other areas. So again, Indian currency to come in. So there are many sectors that opened by the Wickremesinghe presidency, and also the recent visit by President Wickremesinghe, where they had successful bilateral relations with Prime Minister Modi on all those areas. So including the reconciliation as well as the devolution of power, which I mentioned earlier.
Thank you, Asanga. This question is now directed towards Professor Ahmed. Janak asks, How come a leader like Modi, who championed Hindutva politics and bulldozed over minorities in his own country, get on good terms with a Muslim majority country like Bangladesh?
Uh, yes, I guess politics have all the interesting combinations. I guess Bangladesh, thinks that this is an issue that Indian people has to resolve. What kind of government you choose, that Bangladesh cannot dictate. But Bangladesh definitely would love to have a good relationship, so that Bangladesh's main priority is, of course, development. It's a seventh or eighth largest country in the world, 170 million people. It doesn't have the infrastructure, up until now, there's a little bit of it, but not to the extent it should. So it's absolutely focused on development. We have a development without enmity. That's the other thing. We literally don't have any enemies. There are no territorial claims. All the territorial issues have been resolved, with India, with Myanmar, even the maritime. There were a lot of maritime disputes both with India and Myanmar, but that also got resolved. So as we speak, we have a development without enmity. Myanmar tried its, Myanmar military to create an enmity between the two countries on the issue of Rohingya. But we still have kept a very good relationship. We have exports, there's a tourism sector between the two countries. More Bangladeshis actually go to Myanmar than the other way. But we have not stopped our relationship with Myanmar, with other ethnic organizations who are now fighting. And that has to do with our civilization also. It is always open and allowed people to come in. Don't forget, the British entered South Asia or India through Bengal. The only thing was they overstayed for 190 years. But even earlier, the Turks, the Mughals, the Afghans, and they all settled here, and they became Bengalis at one point of time. They married locals. The only exception was the British, who got their wives all the way from Britain, and that's what colonialism is all about. And took things to Britain. If you go to British Museum, you can see all the things that they took from whole of South Asia, not only from Bengal. So I think Bangladesh should say that it's India's people's concern, how they will change, in what way. But this particular election, I think, came out pretty well. Some relief that it was not, an absolute majority of that kind, because that would have given a wrong signal. As I said, if you have fundamentalism in India, you encourage fundamentalism in Bangladesh, and that's a simple rule. But with the limits, with the limitations that the Indian citizens have really voiced, and if they can continue with that, and then this is where I point out that 67 to 70% are not with fundamentalist parties, and then that is where I think one should look. But then one has to also give credit to BJP in terms of infrastructure development. They have made India into a polar. So there are plus points, though the gap between the rich and not so rich have widened. That's true. But still, one should give credit to the way it handles the economy. It has already surpassed UK and France, and I think they have valid reasons to say why we can't be a permanent member in the Security Council. I see merit in that. Why should France and Britain be a permanent member? It doesn't make any sense. So there are plus points, despite all the negative things that we see at the domestic level, particularly with minority bashing and all. So I guess the lesson would be, if they become more, or if they become less ideological, I think Bangladesh should be very happy. That would also help the secular forces in Bangladesh, but we let the matter be decided by Indian citizens and not Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you to all our panelists for your valuable time and contributions. And thank you for joining us for this very engaging, very important conversation. I'd like to remind our audience that this webinar is a part of the Geopolitics Webinar Series organized by Policy Entrepreneurs, Inc. And we encourage you to visit our website and follow us on social media for upcoming events. I'd like to request our panelists to please stand by as our streaming ends. Thank you all for joining and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Please do not disconnect.